We call it democracy. But long before the Constitution was written, before the Founding Fathers gathered in Philadelphia, before the idea of representative government was enshrined in parchment, it was already being practiced. Not in Greece, not in Rome, not in Europe, on this continent, by a confederacy of nations whose laws, debates, and councils would shape the very foundations of what we now call American democracy. And most Americans have never heard their name. Most people assume that democracy arrived in North America with European settlers, that self-governance, representative systems, and checks on power were imported from Enlightenment Europe, and that assumption makes sense. After all, we are taught that the United States borrowed from Greek philosophy, Roman republicanism, and British parliamentary tradition. But that story is incomplete, because when European colonists arrived in what is now upstate New York, they encountered something they had not expected: a functioning democracy. Not a monarchy, not a dictatorship, a confederation governed by councils, by consensus, by laws that had been tested and refined for centuries. The Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Iroquois League, and some of the men who drafted the United States Constitution knew about it, studied it, borrowed from it, but that part was quietly erased. The year is 1142, over 300 years before Columbus set sail. The place, the forested valleys of what will one day be called New York. Near the shores of Onondaga Lake, the air smells of pine and wood smoke. The ground is covered in fallen leaves, soft and damp. The sound of water moves through the trees, streams feeding into the lake feeding into rivers that stretch across the region, and gathered beneath the branches of a great white pine. Leaders from 5 nations are making a decision that will change the course of history. The Mohawk, the Oneida, the Onondaga, the Cayuga, the Seneca. For generations, these nations have been locked in cycles of violence, revenge killings, blood feuds, wars that leave entire communities fractured and grieving. But now, a man named Oneida, the peacemaker, has arrived with a vision, not of conquest, not of dominance, but of unity, of law, of peace, sustained not by force, but by structure. And beside him stands Hiawatha, an orator and diplomat who carries the message to each nation, convincing skeptical leaders that another way is possible. Together, they establish the great law of peace, the Kaianere'kó, a constitution that binds 5 nations into one confederacy, governed not by kings, but by councils, not by decree, but by consensus. This is not a myth. This is history, and it is the oldest continuously functioning participatory democracy in the world. The great law of peace was not written down, not at first. It was encoded in wampum belts, intricate patterns of beads woven into visual records that could be read, recited, and passed down through generations. The system it created, each of the 5 nations maintained its sovereignty. But when decisions affecting the entire confederacy were needed, representatives, sachems, gathered at a grand council. These sachems were chosen not by hereditary right alone, but by clan mothers, women who held the authority to appoint and remove leaders if they failed to serve the people. This was not monarchy. This was accountability. Decisions required consensus, not majority rule. Consensus. Every nation had to agree. Every voice had to be heard. Debates could last days, weeks, until a resolution was found that honored all perspectives. This was not tyranny. This was deliberation. And the Great Law included something even more radical, a provision for amending itself, for adapting, for evolving as new challenges arose. This was not rigid dogma, this was living governance. The Haudenosaunee understood something that many modern democracies still struggle with, that power must be distributed, that authority must be checked, that the people must have a voice, not just in theory, but in practice. Imagine a young Mohawk woman in the year 1600 sitting in a longhouse as her clan holds council. She listens as the clan mother speaks, weighing the fitness of a potential sachem. She watches as the men present their arguments, their visions for how to navigate an increasingly complicated world. She knows that her voice matters, that the women of her clan hold power not as a symbolic gesture, but as a structural reality. That if the sachem fails, if he acts without the consent of the people, the clan mother can strip him of his title. She does not know that within a century, European colonists will arrive in force, that some of them will observe this system with fascination, that a man named Benjamin Franklin will write about the Haudenosaunee model, will reference it in discussions about colonial unity, will suggest that if ignorant savages can form a lasting union, surely the colonies can too. But in this moment, she is simply part of a democracy, one that has existed for over 400 years, one that will continue for centuries more. Democracy was not invented in Philadelphia. It was observed there. When European settlers began sustained contact with the Haudenosaunee in the 1600s and 1700s, they encountered something that challenged their assumptions. Here were savages, as they called them, who held councils, debated policy, removed leaders who abused power, and maintained peace, not through authoritarianism, but through law. And some colonists paid attention. Benjamin Franklin attended treaty negotiations with the Haudenosaunee. He saw how they governed. He heard their speeches about unity, about the strength that comes from confederation. In 1751, he wrote about the Iroquois League, noting that if 6 indigenous nations could form a union and maintain it for centuries, surely 13 colonies could do the same. The Albany Plan of 1754, an early proposal for colonial unity, was directly influenced by these observations. And when the Founding Fathers gathered in Philadelphia in 1787 to draft the Constitution, the Haudenosaunee model was part of the intellectual landscape. Not the only influence, but an influence. Yet in the centuries that followed, this connection was minimized, questioned, erased. Scholars debated whether the founders were truly inspired by indigenous governance or whether the similarities were coincidental. But the Haudenosaunee have never doubted it. They have always known, here is what we rarely acknowledge. The idea that democracy was a purely European gift to the world erases the democratic traditions that already existed here, and that erasure served a purpose. If indigenous peoples were capable of sophisticated governance, of creating systems that rivaled or surpassed European models, then the justification for displacement, that they were too primitive to make use of the land, too savage to govern themselves, falls apart. So the truth was simplified. Indigenous societies were reduced to tribal bands, to chiefs who ruled by force, to peoples without law or structure. But the Haudenosaunee Confederacy was never that. And the historical record, if you look closely, confirms what has always been known by those who lived it. Democracy did not begin with the Greeks. It did not arrive with the Enlightenment. It has always existed in different forms, wherever people decided that power should belong to the many, not the few. This was not the beginning of American democracy. It was the continuation of something older. the principles enshrined in the United States Constitution. Separation of powers, checks and balances, representative governance were not invented in 1787. They were adapted from systems that had been practiced for centuries, including the Haudenosaunee Great Law of Peace. And when the Haudenosaunee Confederacy speaks today about their influence on American democracy, they are not making a symbolic claim. They are stating a historical fact, one that is finally, slowly, being acknowledged. Today, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy still exists. The Grand Council still meets. The clan mothers still hold authority. The Great Law of Peace is still recited, still honored, still guiding governance for the Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, Seneca, and Tuscarora, the Sixth Nation, which joined in the early 1700s. And across the United States, in classrooms, in museums, in conversations about the origins of democracy, the Haudenosaunee influence is beginning to be recognized not as a footnote, but as a foundational part of the story, because understanding where democracy came from matters. It shapes how we see the present. It reminds us that governance by the people, for the people, is not a Western invention. It is a human one. And it was practiced here on this land long before the maps were drawn. We call it democracy. But now you know, it was never just a European idea, imported and gifted. It was already here, already practiced, already refined over centuries by peoples who understood that power must be shared, that voices must be heard, that peace is built not by force, but by law. And the tree they planted, the great tree of peace, is still standing, its roots still deep, its branches still sheltering those who remember. If this changed how you see the origins of democracy, if you realize that history is more layered, more interconnected than you were taught, then this is only the beginning. Subscribe to Before America, where the story starts before the maps, and the past is never as simple as we were told.